Hey guys, my name is Ibrahim Bamahrez, founder and creative director at 25 Branding, and this is my hybrid podcast. Today on the show, I'm happy to have Jacqui Connor, a brain coach and founder of the Be Happy Global, who integrates neuroscience, creativity, presence, perspective, intuition. Now let's get started. Hey Jacqui, welcome to the hybrid podcast, and thank you for joining me today.
Hey, Abe, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here in Ramadan Karim. So yeah, I feel very honored.
So Jacqui and I met at a mindfulness retreat last summer, where we connected, discovered our values are very much aligned, and have stayed in touch ever since. I thought she should be the perfect person to kickstart things, as I'm a firm believer in the importance of mindset, self-development, and optimizing one's life experience in general, as a backdrop for most of my conversations on this podcast.
We're talking about a number of things and connecting, entrepreneurship, creativity, and music, and more. And so we've spoken a few times about the power of intention. And I know that you were sharing even the other day that during this period of Ramadan, you were getting insights into sort of extra insights into what you want your intention to be for this podcast. So let's take a moment and breathe. Perhaps we can close our eyes and breathe into our belly and just slow down for a minute and feel really grounded. So let's connect our feet with the floor where we are. So we're a little bit moving our energy from in our head to really connecting with the earth and feeling very grounded. And then perhaps we can even bring in light or imagine light coming through our head. So we also feel very connected to the greater energy, be that God, spirit. And so if I connect with myself and my heart, connection is what really comes to mind. So connecting with you, this wonderful soul that you are, connecting with the audience who might be listening to this, and sharing authentically our stories, our processes that work for us and each other and together and separately, and really having permission to play. This is the first conversation. This is such a beautiful intention, and let's have fun. How about you? What comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this is what I had in mind. And I think it's worth mentioning that since we're almost at the end of the month of Ramadan right now, and I've had somewhat of a shift in perspective, really, because as you might have heard, or that Ramadan is a super spiritual month for us, and it's a very good time to reflect and think on your life goals, and just really take in everything and reevaluate and set direction for what's to come. And I really felt like it would be a good idea to have this more holistic and more depth to the conversations that I would like to have with all of my guests later on, and also perhaps doing more episodes together. But yeah, with a more shift into the holistic aspect of things. I think just it would really add a different dimension to the conversations and would enable people to extract more benefit as well from everyone I talk to.
I love that. Such a beautiful, and it's a beautiful intention. And I love that this deeper connection within you has come during this really deep introspection, if that's right, during Ramadan.
Yeah,
That's
because I think
beautiful.
because in the beginning it was more of, this is by nature. I'm into the whole mindset, self development, and high achievement performance, and all of these things. It takes a lot of self work, and I think it goes hand in hand with like work, life, relationships. It's all connected, really. it only made sense to do it this way, because in the beginning it was more about creativity, entrepreneurship, music, uh, and they're not separate. Everything is interconnected and interrelated. So having this holistic spin on it would really add so much value, I think. And I think this is part of my personal brand and the way I like to do things. And I'm sure you, as a great coach, honestly, from everything that we share together, and from what I know about you and the work that you do, uh, would you? I'm sure you resonate with this vision as well.
Yeah, and you know what? As you're saying that, I'm actually feeling almost slightly teary.
Wow,
It
that's
says something about me, but I just really feel it. It's so genuine, and I completely hear what you're saying, and I completely resonate with you as well. And like you say, from a personal branding point of view, let's say, okay, there's marketing and business here, and there's all these aspects of you and us as human beings. Yes, we go to work and we might be creating in work and doing great professional business, yet there's all this other parts of us that are going on in life, with our relationships, our passions. For you, I know that music is a real passion and really helps to connect you to you. And of course, when we're interconnecting all the parts of us, then we bring all of us to each aspect of our life. So, be it entrepreneurship and business, be it relationships, be it, health and connecting with ourselves. Real life really is connected.
It's
So,
like
yeah,
showing up fully in life, in
yeah,
whatever you're doing, whether it's within the realm of work, or personal life. It's just like trying to be whole and grounded, and showing up as fully you. Like, I think it might even have a connotation of authenticity, and being authentic to how you like to show up in your life, really, and not
yeah.
trying to fit in too much, and to please other people, or to manipulate certain things in your life that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't that a challenge sometimes?
It
Because
is.
we're all part of systems, be that within work or within families or within other organizations that we're involved in. And sometimes we think we need to show up in a certain way, or we think, okay, I need to be super professional, so how can I possibly, we've even had this conversation, how can I possibly sort of integrate music with work? Even, does it make sense? But it makes sense because it's real and it's creative and it's part of the creative process. And actually, your work, for example, really is super creative. And we are, as humans, we're constantly creating, whether we're doing it consciously or unconsciously. But like you say, when we're able to even acknowledge the parts of us that perhaps we're not super keen on, or those constructs that we're used to performing to, we need to show up in a certain way because it's the right thing to do. And of course, we respect traditions and the environment within which we're in. But when we can really connect with ourselves, it's almost relaxing, isn't it? It's like it's easier, becomes easier, rather than trying, like, I need to, even the conversation we had, a couple of weeks ago when you were talking about this podcast, it's like, well, I need to be this. And it's almost like it's cognitive, it's head. And of course, there's structure that needs to be had, and that's helpful. Well, actually, what my calling is, what's calling me is this. Gosh, maybe it doesn't make sense initially. Oh, but in fact, when we're connected with that truth, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I want to really touch on, because you mentioned creativity and the creative flow
Mm.
a few times. And I think that's I would like to get more into this, the idea of creativity and the industry, and how can we, come at it from a more aligned, relaxed, and fun, playful way, as a tool, not just for the work, because obviously I work, I'm in the creative industry. You were in it at some point as well. But yeah, even other people who are not in the industry, how can they actually tap into their creative flow in different ways, things like, whether you're using it for work purposes, or if you are wanting to find solutions in creative ways, or really just honestly, just as a very loose tool as part of your toolbox to use in a fun, expressive way.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's important. I heard a couple of things there, one being solution finding. And my goodness, we're all, wherever we may be in the world, we're each part of the bigger world process that is very much changing. I mean, this is a truism of life. Things change all the time, but of course faster. You know, we have the social media. Technology means that we get a lot of information at us, and things are seemingly changing very fast. And there's a lot, I mean, goodness knows, in the last few years, we know there's so much that we cannot control or seemingly can't control. So if we can tap to the creative process, I think that inherently is a solution, a way to solutions. So how to do that? And I think coming to your idea about introducing music into this hybrid of beautiful conversation, you know, this is something that you're really passionate about, and that, from what I understanding, maybe you can talk about it, is a way to express. So, you know, yes, you may take on roles in certain areas of life, be that, you know, a business person or a parent or a child for that matter, or a sister or a friend or a partner, a husband or wife, and so on. Yes, that's true. But what really additionally fills you up, you know? And if you really are not connected with that right now, it's like, is there something that when you were younger that you really enjoyed doing? Was that drawing or playing with music, or was that, you know, for some reason I've got doing maths puzzles. I don't know why that's coming to mind, but you know, everyone has a different thing that they find really joyful. Is it being alone and sort of creating on your own and just having space sometimes, or being in nature? Is it doing things in teams and connecting? And I think if we can connect with what frankly brings us joy, you know, what literally feels good physically, emotionally, and sort of elevates our energy, I think that is a way to really connect with the creativity. And it might be coming back to the space of Ramadan and, you know, connection with God, with perhaps spirituality for some. Maybe that's an access route into creativity. It might be prayer, might be meditation. And I think when we're in those spaces, let's say, then that's where we become very present. So rather than scattered and thinking cognitively, we're just in the moment, which is in the zone, which is actually where we access the high performance and the zone of genius, right? In the sort of flow. So things become easier. And I can see you smiling. So what's coming to mind as I'm
Yeah.
saying this?
Yeah, no, I completely resonate with this, with everything that you mentioned. I think it's really about, you know, knowing what works for you, because what works for each person is different from a person to a person. For
Mm.
me personally, I think movement, working out, like moving my body, really gets me into this creative zone. Also, even like normal walks out in the outdoors, that also brings me to this space of, you know, because it gets me out of the overthinking mode, which is what hinders the creative juices, as they say. So yeah, for me, some of these techniques or strategies are movement is definitely a big one of them. Music,
Mm.
obviously, listening to music or creating it. I think travel also, surprisingly, is one of those things, because when you travel, it really, you know, it shocks your system in a good way. It takes you out of the daily monotonous routine that you're used to and that your mind is used to, and it just opens your mind to new possibilities and new ways of thinking, new perspectives. So all of these, I think, honestly, a lot of there are so many tools and techniques and ways to tap into the creative flow, and that's
Mm.
different for each person. It really depends on their proclivities, their personalities, how, you know. So yeah, but I really do believe that, you know, tapping into this creative flow specifically within the industry, I think we need to use it more, because by
Mm.
default, our approach to work and life, it requires more of that creative flow, more access to it. So for us creatives, it really does help to have a big toolbox of different things, that are readily available to for us to, you know, and a lot of times, you know, you might end up, you know, facing blocks, and these things happen. Maybe it happens to us more because we might deplete this source of, you know, it never gets depleted, obviously, but it's just we get in the way. And once we get in the way, we really need to acknowledge that and step back and, you know, say to ourselves, what do I need to do now for me to, you know, step aside and let that flow run again and take its natural course.
Yeah. And that's so important. I think that's an important point that, yeah, there's getting into creativity and really accessing that and accessing sort of the deeper essence of that that can benefit, be it solutions or getting into the flow of the work or connecting with people. But also sometimes we can be blocked. And you also mentioned how it's very individual. You know, what works for one doesn't work for another. What, you know, some things that will work for you won't work for me and vice versa. And there may be commonality in there as well. But ultimately, if we don't really know what works for us, then it's worth discovering, which in itself is a creative process. Someone the other day I was on a call with, and it was a group call, and they were asking, "Oh, how to get into creativity?" And it was interesting what other people were saying, and I would suggest sort of what was coming to mind on that conversation was, well, how about just literally simply trying something different? So, and it can be as simple as if you go to work or you go to the store, for example, one route, why not try a different route? You know, if you say you're doing some physical exercise, if you generally do a routine of XYZ, why not mix it up and do BCA, for example, or, you know, YZX, you know, just if that
Basically
makes
just doing something completely different to get your mind
sense.
out of
Yeah.
this, you know, like the rigid neuropaths that you've created
Yes,
in your brain without you even realizing it.
exactly that. And actually, yeah, in terms of neuropathology and so on, you know, there are literally connections between our body and our brain. You know, if I sort of squeeze myself here on my arm, then there's a circuit that goes up to a very specific point in my mind. And then there's also that point from our mind that connects with our body for movement. So this is why movement can also be so valuable. I mean, we have to move, we move, but we're designed to move. And then if we're perhaps working from home, as many of us do more so these days, or, you know, we're just doing work where we have to sit down, or just doing life where we're sitting down quite a lot, you know, that can also not only physically but mentally get us a bit stuck. So
Stagnation, yeah.
yeah, stagnating. So literally, like, I mean, you and I do it sometimes. I mean, like, we were doing it before our call, weren't we? We kind of got
Yeah.
up and we kind of,
Yeah.
we kind of did a
Just to
bit of a
get the,
physical
yeah,
movement to kind of,
to
yeah,
get the
to
flow,
get in
because
the
it does,
zone.
it really does work. It's funny
Um,
and it feels
yeah.
strange, but it does work. But I want to segue into this, you know, although the creative industry is not just about, you know, being creative or creativity, especially when running a business, it's much more than that, you know,
Mm.
as you know. So, however, we limit, you know, like I will limit our chat today just about the concept of creativity and how to best tap into that. But I just want to mention that maybe some of the things that also could alienate and cut this creative process is that the idea of competition. I think it's very prevalent in the industry, which is not amazing. And as part of, for example, the way we do things, I decided, I was like, no, you know, the way I see things, it's like everything can be a win-win. Why not, you know? If I choose to see it this way, and I'd rather to collaborate with competitors or so-called competitors or with other people in the industry and help each other. So also finding, you know, finding healthier ways of showing up in whichever industry you are, but specifically within the creative industry, because it's all about, you know, portfolio work and the, you know, like the beauty of design and all these things. So there's always this constant seeking or looking for validation to validate the work that you do, and that's normal, you know. It's never going to stop. But it's just really knowing, you know, like trying to detach from this idea that could be super overwhelming because again, a lot of people in the industry rely on portfolio and the work that they do. And again, it's completely fine and natural and normal, but it's just knowing when to not let this, external validation impact the way you see yourself, and for it not to negatively impact your self-image, for example. And I mentioned this because whether people realize it or not, or whether they mention it or not, it's definitely there and it happens to everyone, and specifically with creatives, and artists.
Yeah, a few things come to mind when you hear you talking about that. And one is the idea of partnership. And, yeah, there's competition out there in the world and business and so on. This idea of collaboration and partnership is sort of rather than sort of win-win all round, rather than just abject competition, one above the other and so on. There's enough space typically for all, right? And we're all unique. We're just saying we all have a different pathway in life, and all different. When we going back to our beginning of the conversation, when we bring all of ourselves, so not just like, oh, me as a professional person at work,
not just be the creative person, for example,
or the creative, the creative or the entrepreneur, but oh, this is something that I'm super passionate about and I'm expressing, say it's through music or through nature, whatever it is. Or this is me as someone who is really deeply connected, who loves to connect with people, who loves to connect with sort of a deeper spiritual energy, if you like, and all the interests that I have, and I'm bringing all of that to my work and my business. So that's unique. So, and we all have that, whatever that is. I mean, if you're trying to copy someone else, then there's kind of an energy of trying to be something that may or may not be you. Whereas when we're just super aligned and connected with ourselves, we're able
which
to
is authenticity, really, I think.
Authenticity, absolutely, when being truly authentic. And then, we are able to connect with our work and our zone of genius, if you like. And then, so what comes to mind is a story by Simon Sinek. I don't know if you've heard of him. He talks about the infinite game and leadership and so on in business. And he told a story of how he was in a car with the head of Microsoft. He was espousing the brilliance of their new device and saying, technically, it can do this and do this, and it's much better than Apple, and so on. And then when he did something similar with the head of Apple, he was sort of chiding him a little bit and saying, oh, you know what, I was having a conversation with Microsoft and they were telling me how brilliant their new device was, and it's so much better than yours technically, and so on. And he said that the guy from Apple, rather than coming back with sort of saying why his is better or anything like this, he just said, yeah, it probably is. And that was the end of that conversation.
That's very interesting.
And I think that's, a beautiful way of describing. There's like different approaches in business, right? Yeah, you can really absorb everything that's going on with the competition and then, make sure that yours is better, etc. Or you can be very focused on what you're doing, almost from an inside out, bringing your own genius, creativity, entrepreneurship, and your own passions, and bringing it all together to create something that is unique. So, and I'm sure there's pros and cons of both. But I thought that was quite interesting, and where you're talking about competition. Of course there's competition, but if we get so obsessed with what others are doing, be that in business or life, frankly, then we can go down a sinkhole, and we can really get stuck there.
Exactly.
Trying to be something that we're not. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think I just want to comment on that. The idea of, each person has the choice to really pick the way they see things, and I choose, for example, to not focus on the idea of competition and turn it into my favor by literally connecting with people in my industry, for example, or just connecting with people, etc. You know, how can you reframe the idea of, no, this person is an enemy, or this company is, you know, a competitor, and just making it something that, you know, works for both. It's a win-win. So why not collaborate? Why not have a conversation? Why not have this person on the podcast? Although he's considered a competitor, you know? And yeah, and then from there, things, you know, things change really. So yeah, definitely collaboration over competition, and it's something that we say as part of the 25 branding studio. It's part of our manifesto or DNA, if you will. And yeah, it's definitely for me words to live by. And again, partly why I'm doing this podcast is because I love connecting with people. I love connecting people. I love sharing stuff, you know, and it goes beyond just the creative, you know, branding stuff. That's amazing. I'm super passionate about it. As we said, passion is the thing that sets the sail and that keeps the ship, you know, moving. Without passion, nothing, uh, nothing is sustainable, really. So it's important. But yeah, that's, I think what I'm trying to say is that all of these concepts are very interconnected, whether it's creativity, entrepreneurship, or being a business person, because you really need to wear all these hats, especially if you're a solopreneur like me and like yourself. Obviously, there are other people, companies, brands that have, big teams. So that's where collaboration comes in. But yeah, these ideas really fit in within any system. So yeah, and one more thing is the idea of the left brain and the right brain. I think, as you know, creativity is more right brain thinking, and discipline, passion, or like perseverance, entrepreneurship, all the business, technical, data-driven stuff is left brain, and we definitely need both. Everything needs to be balanced. You know, you cannot focus on one thing and have lack in the other area. So, and this brings me to the idea of how everything in life as well. And you told me this before when we were discussing different things, that, you know, connecting all the aspects of your life, whether it's work, relationships, fun, even leisure time, hobbies, like giving time, giving airtime for each of these aspects in your life really impacts all areas of your life. So we think that, okay, if I just focus on work, then my life is going to be amazing. No, not really, because if you're just focusing on one area of your life, the other areas which you're not paying attention to are going to deteriorate, which in turn is going to impact your work negatively, and vice versa.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Everything is, yeah, we talk about this, everything to, and even I mean, actually, just to drop in this idea of left brain, right brain, and we talk, you know, it's easy to talk in those terms, sort of creativity and sort of logic.
Just
And, you
wanted
know,
to
I
get
think technically,
I wanted to get
yeah.
a bit scientific there, you know?
And I think if we were going to get really scientific, that, you know, there's like lots, is it technically like just left and just right? Because again, the brain is very complex and people are still working out how it actually works, and there's different parts of the brain. But yes, the idea of interconnecting, of course, if we're entrepreneurs or business owners, then we have to be disciplined, right? And we have to do things that we don't want to do. Sometimes equally in life, if you talked about movement and, you know, staying fit and healthy, because if we're working for ourselves, it can, on one hand, it can be easy, really easy to keep going and never stop. And okay, that might work for some people, but we might need to be disciplined if we want to have relationships and we want to have health and we want to have our passions and integrate all the parts of us. Then being disciplined to say no, so that we can focus on what really is adding value to our life and our work, and to stop sometimes, to have the different parts of our lives included, or to, you know, say no to some projects. Also, in terms of collaboration, you're talking there about partnership. you know, having even so-called competitors in the space of branding and 25 branding on your podcast. I mean, I love that idea, and why not? Because that's a different perspective, right? You know, and you know, let's have a conversation. I mean, what would that be like? That would be a really interesting conversation, I think, to listen to, you know, and sort of to understand different perspectives, and also coming from a place of, let's say, abundance. So yeah, you know, we can respect each other. We can appreciate our differences, maybe the similarities too. Maybe there's space for all, because we're each bringing all the parts of us, and we're each unique, be it ourselves when we bring ourselves, and our businesses.
Also, the idea of there's enough for everyone, because I think some people get stuck in the idea of that, oh my God, they're working with a client that I would love to work with. I mean, it's understandable, it happens to everyone, but it's like that there's so much more for everyone. And if you look at it this way, it's more of an abundant way of approaching it. So
Yeah, and sorry, I was
no,
just going to
sorry,
add,
go ahead.
you know, in terms of even how our brains work, you know, if we're coming from a perspective of we're under attack, right? So on a really fundamental sort of evolutionary point of
Like a
view,
flight or fight mode.
fight or flight mode, yeah, we're under attack. And okay, there is, I mean, I can be this person as well, you know, under extreme pressure. I'm someone who can perform actually very well, but equally I've sort of flipped it a little bit in more recent times, that, you know, do I want to be that person that only is driven by adrenaline and cortisol? Ultimately, that's not healthy. That's maybe another podcast.
Exactly. No,
But
that definitely should be highlighted.
yeah, we can talk about that.
Super
But
important.
yeah, super important. But you know, equally, sort of, if we're just coming from that point of view all the time, is that super healthy? Are we driven by just trying to compensate for something, rather than when we're, again, going back to being really connected, in the flow, being in our zone of genius? So we are in our, yes, creativity, but also in the discipline space, and everything is super integrated. Then in fact, our performance goes up. You know,
Yes.
if we're more, you know, even in teams, there's loads of science and data around this now, that if teams are connected, so there's partnership, that there's, so that sort of social connection, which is super important, but then also feeling safe, you know, within teams, let's say, and then feeling sort of happy, in really simple terms, then we actually perform better. And then if we're solo entrepreneurs, how to do that? And that question of who's in the mud with us, that reminds me of Stephen Bartlett. Actually, I asked him a question recently, and he came back with a different answer, but it was related to not what is the mud, what are the challenges, but who's in there with us. And I think that's really an important question for entrepreneurs. Who's in there with us? You know, because if we are literally trying to do everything on ourselves, are there little bits that we can outsource to, you know, freelancers,
Like
or
creating a support system, if you will.
creating a support sort? I mean, this is so important, isn't it? And it's like, who can we delegate at work? And, you know, there are a lot of companies online now that are, you know, you can often outsource for not even that much, but actually get good work.
Yes.
Or, you know, who's in our family or our friends or our partners or our teams, or coach. You know, I'm a coach. People come to me because, you know, people need to get out of their busyness in their mind. They can't, you know, it's not always the people that you know really well are the right people to connect with, let's say. That's one way. But, you know, how to create, and maybe that's a question for anyone who's listening, just to even reflect upon, even meditate, or, you know, sit still with, who is in my team, who's in the mud with me, and if there's a gap right now, then allowing the space for the creativity and the solutions to come, so you can create that, because you don't want to be alone the whole time. You know, you want to connect to yourself and your own passions, yes, but how to connect with others. You know, we're on here, we're sitting in different countries. You and I both have a very global perspective in a very global way, meaning, you know, different countries, but also different perspectives, you know, connecting sort of
Which is
mind, body, energy, connecting everything. Everything is interconnected and global.
exactly, which actually, this is it's perfect that you're mentioning this, because I want to touch upon this idea of bridging the gap between East and West. It's also part of
Yeah,
the DNA, and we were talking
yeah,
about this earlier, and it's
yeah.
really I want to bring this into the hybrid podcast, because one of my intentions is that I want to be talking. Actually, I am going to be speaking with people from the Western world and people locally here or in the Middle East. So I love this idea of bridging this gap between these two different worlds. I mean, they are different in a sense, but there's so much more commonalities than differences. And I want to shed light on this, just like focusing on the collaboration bit rather than the competition bit. I also want to bridge the gap by focusing on the common ground rather than the differences. Um, so very well said, and I think this is one of the main reasons why we were able to connect very deeply, me and you, and do this and decide to do this episode together, and hopefully more episodes in the future. Um,
I would just touch on that as well, because it's something that I've been thinking about actually for a long time, and also wanting to partner and connect. And then when we were but each sharing that we had been thinking the same thing, and that sometimes, let's say from East and West, the sometimes can be misunderstanding, or there's kind of social people have maybe stereotypical thinking
like
of
preconceived
particular norm
notions, yeah.
that's a good way of saying it, preconceived notions, because of what we've learned over time. And at the end of the day, there's basically human beings that are biologically quite similar, and made up, it's quite similar, have basic human needs, and also want to connect, have families, you know and we just happen to be sitting in different parts of the world, and may have been brought up in a little bit of different, or sometimes very different cultures, sometimes the same, but equally, certainly, down the road from where I am, there's people from lots of different cultures, and on the surface might look the same in very simple ways, or have things that are very simple, but underneath are very, very different. Yet, if you go even deeper, the same. Whereas, just because we're living in different countries right now,
So by the way, Jacqui's
there's
in
a human
London.
connection.
Yeah, yeah,
There's
just
human connection. So, but yeah, there's like, so that kind of human connection. So, and yeah, just when we're able to really tune in to similarities, and
okay.
perhaps build a habit for looking for that, then we can create teams, let's say, even when we're solopreneurs, because we're creating partnerships.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
we can connect with ourselves, so we can support ourselves healthily whilst being disciplined
Yeah.
and creative, and sort of integrating in a hybrid way.
Well said, well said. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I just want to mention that, by the way, guys, Jackie's in London. I'm in Jeddah. So just to give you some perspective, because we did not mention that earlier on. So I think I want to end with the music bit, which is for me the most fun part. I keep on saying this on this podcast. I mentioned it in my intro episode, which was like a super short episode, but yeah. Um, so with the music part, how does this fit in to this whole formula, Um, I think for me, the hybrid podcast is the culmination of all of it's like an expressive outlet as an agency, and me personally as Ibrahim. So, creativity, entrepreneurship, and then music. I think the music, if you want to see this as different aspects of me, or of my personality or of my practice, the music bit is the lighter, more fun, like a hobby kind of aspect of me. And actually, this is how it started. And then I started, integrating it into the work that I do. So I think it's a bit of both, really. I practice it in a professional way, but for me, it's definitely more of the fun aspect of me, which I decided to bring on the podcast, although it might not seem super relevant, but I think I'm finding ways to make it relevant, to make this whole podcast more of an eclectic, collection of expressions, really. And I want to ask you, what do you from a more holistic and spiritual and connected space. I think the possibilities are endless when it comes to music, because it can impact your work, creativity, everything really. So what do you think are the possibilities in terms of going beyond the traditional way of us thinking of music, for example, in terms of like sound healing and the impact of music on focus, on creativity, meditation music. I mean, that's why I keep on saying the possibilities are endless. So yeah, I just want to know what you think about that as a coach.
Yeah, many things come to mind. On that last point where you're saying about different types of music, I think in terms of how we receive information, and a lot of it is, okay, we sort of think in terms of words often, although only because we can think in pictures and so on. But we receive information through our senses. So we have the five senses and maybe subtle energies as well. And music is proven that it goes straight through to different parts of the brain, and connects with our body. And we know that music, if there's music from key moments in our life, then we kind of attach the music with the event, and we have a richer memory of that experience. And then for me, when I listen to music, I often listen to music when I'm working. And there's a particular, in fact, I don't know why I'm sort of always saying why is this funny? I don't know actually if it is, but I've actually listened to David Pramel and Gayatri Mantra so much over the course of my life. And when I really want to get into the zone and really focus and be really disciplined, I listen to that tune in particular on repeat. And I'm quite often asking Siri to play me chilled music. But I think it really connects us. And so I think that's why, if you talk in terms of spiritual practice, is why music is so, I mean, obviously going back to, millennia, making noise and making sounds in patterns, natural music that is really listening then, and then it maybe uplifts, we can dance to it, we can move to music. And, there's a whole kind of brain, body, whole person response to music. But I also think in terms of when you were sharing with me about your passion and almost perhaps initially kind of being a little bit shy about it because it's very personal. But also, I don't know if you want to speak about this or not, but you were saying it's like a real connection. And there was a word that you used, it's almost like a connection with God. Can you remember that? And you said it, you felt really connected, and then it's almost like an expression of you connecting with others if you're making music and sharing that in groups. And there's almost like this spiritual element to it, is what I was hearing.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think growing up, as a kid, growing up with music, listening to a lot of music, so it's something that it was part of the way, part of the way I, perceive life or deal with life. And it just became second nature that music is this thing that gets me into the zone and allows me to connect with myself and others in profound ways. So yeah, definitely. I think I mentioned that it gives me the sense of connection, and this is why I'm so into it, because I'm definitely more of an auditory person. So the sound goes straight to my heart, I think. And I think it does with a lot of people. So yeah, I cannot recommend it more, even for people who, for example, are not, because I see, people are different, on a spectrum where, some people are so into music and it's a big part of their lives, and you have others who, they're like, yeah, whatever, it's just background noise or whatever. But I think I would love to invite others, whether it's normal music or it's like relaxation music, you know. I think it's such a broad thing, and everyone can find a piece for them in it to help them in life in general, whether it's in maybe to focus or just to have fun, connect with people, dance, relax. So there's a bit of something for everyone, really. For me, again, I love producing music, mixing music, and just experimenting with music in general. And this is why, and what I intend to share with people on the podcast is I want to do these episodes, which are just literally me sharing different tracks within different music genres, maybe more specifically like non-commercial music, which is what I'm into, and really curating a certain playlist, you know, depending on on my mood within a certain day, you know, and just transmitting that to people, and just for them to enjoy, really. So it's again, it's more of playful. It's creative, playful, joyful episodes where, you know, it's just about sharing the music and getting out of this, you know, intense conversational stuff that we do with guests and with, you know, what we're doing today, because this requires a lot of you know, you need to digest the information, you need to focus. So it's always nice to have, you know, almost transmit this fun part of me to people and connect with them in a different way. I think that's the best way to put it. So I'm also super excited to do that, as well as, you know, have guests that are musicians, artists, people who are in the music space, and connecting with them and talking about different, maybe with you, Jacqui, different uses of music, the different things of how you can experiment with it, and just really talking about this broad perspective of how we can bring more music into our lives and to make it add spice to our life, maybe.
But I think you mentioned that, didn't you? You were saying, oh, it's how I really connect with fun.
Yeah, I
You
know.
know,
I
and
want to
maybe
mention one. Sorry to cut
yeah,
you
go on.
off, but like I really want to say this. This is something that I always say. I always feel that music is the soundtrack of life, and I love this. I don't know if it was a saying or something that I came up with. I
Yeah.
think someone said that before, and I really think it's super true. It's like imagine yourself in any situation or just like looking at something, and just inject some music, and it just adds this crazy dimension of making it more visceral, more, you know, more exciting, more engaging, really. And this is, I also say this with movies. Imagine you're watching a silent movie without a soundtrack, and just add the soundtrack. You can really feel the difference there, you know. And yeah, you were saying something, and I just had to jump in before I forget this.
No, I'm glad you did. I don't know what I was going to say, but
The
what came to
creative flow, you
mind.
know.
No, and it's really good to see you laughing, because I heard you were saying like it's quite serious having a conversation, but I know that's like, you know, we're kind of experimenting and playing a little bit here. But of course, it's like that visceral response, isn't it? And actually, what comes to mind, I was at a conference recently, and one of the presenters, and it was about happiness actually, and fulfillment, and so on. There's a lot of people from different disciplines and scientists and psychologists and so on. And one of the presenters presented a film, a mini film, a video with different images. And first round, she presented a particular type of music. And the experience at the end was like, oh, all these kind of difficult, sad things going on. Like you were moved, like you would be in a movie, like maybe a bit of a tragedy. And then she played exactly the same film with different music. And the meaning of those images completely changed.
Perfect.
And so, and it all was like uplifting and joyful, and it was completely different. And it was really great at sort of as a visual auditory experience of how we can actually make meaning and music can go hand in hand, right?
So I have a couple of questions for you that I usually would like to end my episodes with.
Okay.
What helps you get in your creative flow, and what is your favorite type of music?
So what gets me in my creative flow is a combination of I go and do some movement, and then I do something like a meditation. I often write something down as an intention, but in real time. And then I generally put music on. the
Cool.
specific soundtrack. And then the second question?
What's your favorite type of music?
I do like, I'm the worst person to knowing the genre.
It
So
can be,
I think it's
many
like
things.
chill, like music that speaks to my soul, that gets me in my body. And there's different genres actually of that, but anything that really I feel very connected with. And then, yeah, I have a visceral response.
So, okay. Thank you, Jacqui, for sharing with us all these helpful tools in aligning our body and spirit when it comes to our work and life in general. This was super fun and insightful, and I look forward as well to have more conversations like this with you in the near future.
Oh, thank you.
So we'll talk soon.
Let's talk soon, and let's send some amazing energy and connection vibes out to anyone who's listening to this.
Yes,
Wishing
for
them well
sure.
too, and connection, and yeah,
And
tapping
definitely
into what works for them.
look out for more of these vibes in future episodes with Jacqui and with other guests and with the music episodes as well. You can follow Jacqui on Instagram at Be Happy Global Community or visit her website at www.behappyglobal.com for more information about her and her work. So this was all for today's episode. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at 25 Branding and at Hybrid 25 Podcast. The episode will be available on most audio streaming platforms, which you can find in our bio. Stay tuned for my next episode. Peace out.